This is Godly Talks and Devil's Advocates, where we discuss God-centered topics in our pursuit of truth, and most of all to answer, who really hardened Pharaoh's heart?
Okay. How do we do that and make it not awkward? I guess it's not really possible, is it?
No.
Well, no, not until we do this for a while. I think we just need to say something like, all right, well, this is the start of the show, we think.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm Tim.
I'm Doug.
I'm Matt. I'm David.
This is Godly Talks and Devil's Advocates.
Cool.
So, last week we talked a little bit about creation and the Genesis story, and I was just going to do a quick read of a correction, first of all, that Doug did. So red hue was not a technical term. Upon a little research, it's actually called the Doppler effect or Doppler shift. Hubble used it to publish a paper demonstrating that the universe was expanding. So a little follow-up on the term red hue. And then we had a comment from a listener who said, actually, I enjoyed the discussion. Lots of good thoughts here. A topic I've not visited for quite some time. The book of Genesis has always fascinated me, at times for different reasons. Your points about why would God be deceptive in making the earth look old when it was in fact young is something I've not considered. I don't have a theological problem with an old earth idea, though, as Tim mentioned, the quasi-apologetics I heard growing up have left much doubt in my mind as to where science really is conclusive or inconclusive on the fact. And today's progressive humanist ideology masquerading as so-called science turns me off to further study, since the prerequisite for inquiry today is more based on your belief than your observations. So, the point there meaning that, like, you come to the investigation with already, like, preconceived notions, in mind. I personally feel freedom to remove time from the picture. While a literal reading of Genesis 1 has days mentioned, no such time constraint is given for the period in the garden. For all we know, Adam and Eve were in the garden for millennia. I think of C.S. Lewis' depiction of this pre-scene world in his book Pelandra and find a refreshing thought that the fall likely did not occur in an instant. The temptation could have been years in the building. I also agree with the point that I have a philosophical and theological commitment to the fact that God made man in his own image. I can't escape that theme throughout Scripture, and the idea of a pre-human Neanderthal that is soulless is too great an inconsistency for me to intellectually accept. I also appreciate David's literal interpretation, and I'm reluctant to cede any other interpretation because it's a slippery slope for the unskilled to pick and choose Scripture. However, I do also accept that different parts of the Bible are written in different prose, and my English translation lacks the context and the culture of the Hebrew writers who scribed the word of the living God for their people and the nations. I believe there's a balance between the two, and where I can't explain it, I accept both. The literal word as I get to read it in 21st century English, and the fact that God is sovereign and made an earth older than Genesis appears to call it. Maybe it's an easy out, but I think it takes less faith to accept those apparent inconsistencies than it does to trust God will give me the patience to depend on him to teach my children every day. Thanks for the link. And then final thoughts on creation?
What did he say? I believe it takes less faith to believe those inconsistencies than to believe that God will give me the faith to teach my kids every day?
Yeah. I think he was referencing the inconsistencies between the apparent age of the earth and...
Yeah, I got that. And then the second part, that it's harder to... It takes less faith to believe, to just accept that those inconsistencies exist and God still...
I think he was just maybe saying that, like...
It really doesn't matter because God,
I think what he's saying is that the here and now things that you need faith for are...
even harder, or
like way more difficult, and way more difficult or way more important than things that were that long ago. I don't know. That's kind of how I read it, but
I couldn't understand what he was saying from it. I know I responded a couple of times to it at even greater length than his email, I know, for the first one. I'm not sure that it's going to be helpful for us to read that now. But I can post it if you guys want to read it.
I think we all read it already. At least I got all the links that you sent back and forth between the two of you.
But yeah, I wasn't there before I started sending the links. It was
not the links, but just the back and forth emails.
Yeah. Okay.
No, the other thing is too. I mean, we can. We don't have to include that part in the recording. I just thought it was interesting to discuss it. So.
No, I think it's good. I mean,
It was, I mean,
I
it was,
was
it was
gonna-
a really nice feedback. Like, it was a
Yeah,
nice.
talk about him in this first person. It's Peter.
I really,
He's been here before.
I love the feedback, and I love that there was a
He's
discussion.
one of our listeners. Since we have one listener.
Right.
No, we have 3 at least.
He's one of our listeners.
One of our 3 listeners. Thanks, guys.
We can't know all of our listeners by name.
Can't we?
Consider it a podcast shout out. Thanks for your email, Peter.
Look, we're trying to really stay in touch with them.
Right. I do have to say that if anyone, for some reason, is hearing this but hasn't heard the previous one, if you listen to the previous one, I misspoke on the scientific portion
A lot.
a lot. Okay, for my education and training, it was an embarrassing amount, and so I put the corrections in the post on the blogger feed.
There's at least 2 or 3 words that he mispronounced.
No, I didn't.
So did you go
mispronounce-
back and listen to it and like hear?
Well, when I was
scientific-
when I was editing,
Yeah.
I was like something felt off in there, and I knew, like 3/4 of the way through, I knew that I had confused something, and so then I went back and
What
looked
it have to
into
do
it.
with the DNA?
Basically, I rolled DNA, transcription, translation, and protein synthesis all together
Like a
into
scrub.
one thing. Yeah. So
It sounded good to me.
those are all separate processes and require separate things. But if anything, it just amplifies the point that there's so much machinery and handing off and step by step processes that have to happen. Like, it's infeasible that it could have not been designed. Like, it's infeasible when you really weigh out all the machinery.
Infeasible or unfeasible?
Is there a difference?
I don't know. I'm just trying to help you.
Unfeasible. So
I'm
that's
just trying
all.
to save you from
If further embarrassment. Trust me, I'm used to the embarrassment. But this one I had to correct. So that's out there.
Well, thank you for admitting your mistakes and failures.
Hey, I'm not too big to admit my mistakes and failures.
I know.
All right, Matt.
It's all you, big guy.
All right, everybody. Well, let's talk about miracles. So, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, this is going to be really just a kind of non-linear collection of stuff that has to do with miracles. I kind of started researching this just because miracles I was interested in, and I didn't really know a lot about them. Hadn't really done much research on them. So I came at it with a bunch of different questions, did a lot of reading, and then at the end, I kind of realized that there's no real point in trying to force this into a narrative with a beginning and an end. So I think I just kind of collected a lot of stuff, and I think that from this we'll easily be able to find some good conversations that'll come out of it. So I think the first thing that I was curious about was I made a quiz, and I'd be curious to have you guys take it because I think it'd be a cool way to like get a quick overview of where people kind of land on this topic and what people kind of think about this topic. A lot of the quiz questions are questions that just I had for myself, and so selfishly I thought it'd be kind of a cool way to see.
You want to just read them while we take it, maybe?
That's what I was exactly going to suggest. So I'll read them out, and then you guys, while I'm reading them out, you can take it.
I already took it.
You already took it?
I already took it.
I'm doing it now.
Okay, so the first question is, do you believe miracles still happen? Second question is, have you ever witnessed or experienced something that you consider to be a miracle? Third question is, do you know anyone who claims to have witnessed or experienced a miracle and you believe them? Fourth question is, do you pray specifically for something or do you often pray specifically for something miraculous to happen? And you could say very often, often, sometimes, not very often, or never. Number 5, if you believe miracles still happen, do you think they are more common in some parts of the world than others, or they occur everywhere equally? Number 6, if you selected the second answer to question 5, so if you said that they're more prevalent in certain societies, can you briefly explain where you think miracles are more likely to occur? I'm going to quickly put my own answer in here.
All right, done.
Number 7 is, do you think that the likelihood of a miracle occurring is affected by the number of people praying for it to happen. And number 8 is if someone prays for a miracle and it occurs, that implies that this person is extremely holy, righteous, and close to God.
It's a bummer I can't get back to my survey. I've taken it.
So I can show you I should be able to see the answers.
Are we going to talk about the answers?
Yeah, I think that'd be fun. I think that'd be cool. Cool, 4 responses.
Hey, that's us. Ta-da! Technology.
All right, so I don't know how visual you guys are, but I can kind of. Okay, I can just say it out. So first question is, do you believe miracles still happen? Everyone said yes. That's good. That puts us at least in the
100%.
same. That puts us in the same big tent on this. Next question is, have you ever witnessed or experienced something you consider to be a miracle? Even split, 2 yes, 2 no. So that's interesting.
I want to know who the no's were. I mean, I was.
You're one of them?
I want to know who the other was.
I said no.
What?
Okay.
Wait, read the exact wording of the question again.
Have you ever witnessed or experienced something that you consider to be a miracle?
Do you want to go through this one by one, like we discuss at each question, or do you want to
I
go
think
through
if you want to shout out your like, I think this is really just like popcorn, you know, like, so if you want
Okay.
to
I don't think I've
to
experienced.
talk about
I
it.
said no because I don't believe that I've experienced something that I could definitively defend to someone who didn't believe in miracles that it was a miracle.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean that I haven't experienced things that I wouldn't say that it's a miracle, but it's just I haven't experienced anything where I could say like, oh, the X-ray showed the tumor, and then the X-ray showed a tumor, and it was like disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
But like, yeah, I mean, I've experienced things that I considered to be very low probability, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
Well, yeah. So, based on your definition, I probably would have answered no, because I don't think you could ever definitively
anything?
prove a miracle to any outside person who doesn't believe in miracles, and that's the whole premise of C.S. Lewis's book, Miracles. So,
But certainly there are instances where I've read of things where, I mean, if you were there, it would have been very difficult to deny things. I mean, not just from scripture, but like I read other accounts of things where it would be very difficult to deny.
that's
If,
true.
if you were there,
but
not,
I've heard of the people that were there still
them.
denying. I mean,
Right.
So I think the best explanation is what C.S. Lewis used, and he equated it to aliens. If you, or ghosts actually is the one that's better. If you don't believe in ghosts, a ghost could come and smack you in the face, and you wouldn't believe that it was a ghost. You would come up with a reason as to why it wasn't a ghost. And furthermore, the opposite can be said about somebody who does believe in ghosts. They can make a lot of different non-ghost things into ghosts.
Yeah, and I agree with that completely, but I think in order to discuss the topic, like we're gonna have to like define some sort of reasonable basis for, like, I mean, even our previous topic from last week, like I think we could make the same argument that like, oh, if you don't really want to believe in God, then you're not ever gonna believe in creation, or if you really, I mean,
Yes.
so I mean, obviously, like we know that people who have preconceived notions about things are not gonna change their minds, but like, I guess.
Well, that was why I didn't put that in my definition when answering that question, because I was ruling those people out. I was
I
saying
think-
if a reasonable person were to,
Well, but
including myself, like, I mean, I believe myself to be a reasonable person, so if I believe that something was a miracle,
But it's not fair, I think, to act like miracles are all the same, or the experiencing them. Like, if you were there when Jesus calls Lazarus out of the tomb, that's different than me telling you that, like, my foot was hurting and then I prayed for it. And, like, I mean, so it's not fair to, like, act like they're all relative, or that the scale of, belief that's involved would be similar. I mean, there's certain things that just, like, if you watched, Peter and John make the guy walk, like, right in the gates of the temple, like,
so you're basing a miracle based on,
no.
you're judging a miracle based on whether or not you could adequately convince somebody else that it was a miracle?
No, but I am basing. I can't explain whether or not something is a miracle.
Okay.
And I think,
Like I can't define if it is a miracle or not. I guess is the saying. Like
I mean, I think so. I kind of agree with what Doug was saying. One thing, and this is skipping ahead a little bit, but the big question that I researched or asked myself was that, are there any miracles which have been absolutely rock solidly documented? And if so, would it make sense to use those as evidence to others that God exists? So then we go through a couple of different things where I, looked at videos, looked at scientific studies. One of the things I came across, not necessarily C.S. Lewis's book, but Justin Hume, who is a famous humanist and I believe atheist philosopher and apologist, he has a short little thing on miracles, which I think I kind of agree with, where he basically just says, and you can read out the text here, but he's like, look, the only way that we can judge between two claims is by weighing the evidence. And if one claim is against natural laws, then that claim is, by definition, pitting itself against the vast majority of human experience, which confirms natural laws. So you, by definition, you've got this guy over here saying something I observed happened that is totally against natural laws, and his evidence is maybe a couple witnesses, maybe a compelling story, and then you've got the whole body of human experience on the other side. And so he says that it's just impractical to believe that he could ever outweigh it, even if he had some compelling things. And then he goes on to caution that people really like to, believe in fantastical stories and blah, blah, blah. But if you really go down to, okay, we've got this body of evidence versus this body of evidence, how could that body of evidence which supports the miracle ever be greater? Which,
so, meaning like even if it were true, it'd be impossible to like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, because at the end of the day, you've just got to make a judgment call between the two. So even though I do believe in miracles, finding that and also just what I saw when I was researching the scientific studies and stuff made me kind of think that probably showing people quote unquote proof of miracles is not the best evangelical strategy. So that's kind of popping out early, but at the quiz for now, I'm really more interested in hearing about your personal beliefs and what you consider to be true for yourself, not whether you can prove it. So,
well, do you think since you got into this Justin Hume stuff, do you want to go ahead and should we dovetail into that first and then come back to the survey, or do you want to come back to that?
Let's come back to that. I'm really curious to hear about. So I think we did a good job of framing for these survey questions that it's really just about what you consider to be true for yourself and whether you can prove it. And so I'd just be curious to hear about your guys' stories and kind of things that you've seen. So for Doug, for example, you said that yes, you believe that you've seen a miracle.
That's supposed to be anonymous.
Sorry.
Now the whole podcast knows.
So Doug, you answered.
Wait a minute, our emails weren't linked to the survey.
Deduction. You cheated.
So, yeah, I mean, I think it comes back to, unfortunately, kind of the definition of miracle. And to me, I'm considering miracles within my own experience. And a lot of times, it's kind of blurred for me. If I would be honest about it, it's kind of blurred between just God acting in the universe versus God acting a little bit more in the universe and making it like a harder push, so to speak.
Well, yeah, I mean, a miracle just means that God intervened. So let's say that for whatever reason I'll really need, I don't know, some kind of medicine, and that medicine shows up in an Amazon box even though I never ordered it.
Right.
So...
And I would consider that a miracle, but I have a low threshold because I kind of take any opportunity I can where I really feel like I see God speak or act around me, within me, etc. I take those as mini miracles, if you will. And so... like, I don't know. The first example that comes to mind is the quote miracle that happened when I got converted, and it was just an overwhelming sense of peace in one of the most stressful times in my life at that point. Another one is a little bit later, like just everything falling into place when I thought I was in between a rock and a hard place and not knowing where to go with my life, where to live, what to do with my career, etc. And then just immediately this perfectly groomed path seemed to be laid out before me, and I had a job interview and an apartment set up, and moved to Minnesota, and it just all fell into place like with ridiculous precision. So I take a lot of things like that, and I try not to lose my awe over them. And so I try to consider those miracles because they draw me closer to God every time. And I actively fight to keep those at a low threshold, because it brings me closer to him. So my miracle, I don't have any miracles of the mom lifting the car to get a baby or anything. I've heard a lot of people, which is another question, right, later. I've heard a lot of people explain stories where it's just straight up crazy.
Yeah.
And I heard one on Tuesday.
You mean miraculous?
Yes, miraculous. Very good wordplay, David.
I know. I'm good for something in this group.
Yeah. So Cliff's Notes version.
It's like a crazy.
Cliff's Notes version of something I would consider to be somewhat of a miracle is this person shared at our gospel community that this friend of hers was going through a custody battle or some legal battle, and then just out of nowhere the guy just called like literally everything off. Just brought it to a grinding halt and was like, nope, never mind, I'm done. I'm paying the court fees or whatever. And it was just done. Like, prayer answered of like, let this be over. Let's be resolved. And it just came to a grinding halt and was over. And everything worked out perfectly. So it seems like really non-miraculous stuff. But I think that's what kind of saddens me about miracles. And I don't want to get there yet, or ever. But that's what saddens me about it, is that some people think that it has to be like, oh, this building appeared from out of nowhere, or a whole new continent came up from out of the ocean that we weren't expecting, a brand new planet that's inhabitable came up in between us and Mars, and, something just ridiculous.
That would be a miracle.
That's what I'm saying. Like, what does it take for people? Because what happens is something that's so miraculous, like having an entire computer in our pocket, being able to video chat with people around the world instantaneously. These are no longer miracles, but go back 100 years and they would be. So like,
well, but they would be perceived as miracles, but they would never be miracles because they're based on scientific principles.
True. I'm just I'm trying to lay the groundwork to show that the threshold for what you would consider a miracle goes up based on your propensity to disbelief.
I mean, I do agree, and I think it's a good word that God appears to have a preference for working subtly, but that doesn't mean he's not working,
Right.
So, I mean, even if, I know a lot of it comes out of just like him, causing you to impulsively go do something or reach out to somebody, like as long as God intervenes and modifies how this reality plays out, I call it a miracle. It's a supernatural intervention. I think it's a good point to look for those.
So what was
the only and what I wanted to say I think in response to that was, I think my answer of no, I think reveals a predilection in me to, like, based on my background, I am really cautious about, hypocrisy and like just, being really like kind of pretend or false or And so, I mean, based on like your definition, I can very easily say yes, just as, based on my definition, you would have said no.
Right.
But like, I think I just have a very, very much a defensive stance about like not being fake. And so sometimes I tend to go the other way, like just to try to be as authentic as possible. Because I just don't want to be a person who goes around and like, oh, the sun came up again today. It's a miracle.
It's a miracle.
Like, not that I don't appreciate that is a miracle, like in some sense of the word, but I just find that kind of thing turns off other people so much.
Sure.
So anyway.
Well, that sort of thing can be abused, that's for sure. There's a line there.
So what was yours?
I was filling this out as I was reading the questions. I meant to answer no to this one, but yes to the next one.
Oh, sweet. So I'm the only one?
So wait, which one were you going to answer?
I wanted to say, do you know anyone who claims to have witnessed or experienced a miracle? Do you believe them?
You were gonna say yes.
I did say yes to that one.
You can all say yes now.
So we had 2 yeses to that one and a no, and I can't decide. For that one, though, I mean, the story, it almost feels like it's myself because it happened to my wife. Paul, I don't know. This is kind of an intense story, so I don't mean to freak out the podcast listeners, but
I can.
Hang on. Let me wrap my head around.
You're right. That was intense.
My wife, she studied abroad at KU back when we were in college, and one day she was biking out towards Clinton Lake, and this guy, it was like during the middle of the day, like hot day, like no one was around, and this guy, like, who was on drugs, like, grabbed her off her bike and drug her like several feet off into the bushes, and then just like beat the crap out of her, had a knife, cut her several places, and then decided he was going to choke her to death. And he's like choking her out, and she's like fighting not to lose consciousness. And like as she's slipping off, she looks off in the grass, and she sees like 2 like people in white, like with white t-shirts or whatever. And so she's like just staring at them, focusing, and then the guy notices them, and so he like lets go, and then she gets a breath, and she can start yelling like help, help. And it was 2 joggers who actually were pretty young kids. They were only like 13, 14. And they like came over, and one called the police, who got there before, she lost too much blood. And also, scared him off. And then he got caught and is in jail. But like, that was like something that radically changed both of our lives, because, well, her life for obvious reasons, and then me for one going through it with her. Like, it sounds weird, but that's when I went from like, oh, she's just a girlfriend, is like really seeing her soul and like considering her much more seriously, just because of like her strength and the way she dealt with it, and the way that, you can't even like tell it now, but just the timing of it, I think, makes it really hard for either of us to say that it wasn't a miracle, because middle of a hot day, out in a remote place, and then, I mean, she's literally, she's off in a bush basically, right? So if she goes unconscious, then the guy just has to stand up and walk away, and it's still game over, So it is the fact that she's literally slipping off, just like fighting to stay there, and then she sees those guys in white, and then she's just focusing on them for a few more seconds until, so that to me is just, it's just insane. Like, the timing of that, it just, to me, it makes me think that God saved her, Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's that story, and a big reason why we definitely believe in them, and definitely believe that. And that story is also crazy because, if she doesn't survive that, then like so much changes in the world. Ben's not here, our second's not here, we don't get married, like so much stuff. So it kind of makes me feel like there are like these boundaries of what God wants the world to go in, and like you just can't really break out of them. Like he just kind of keeps them on a path. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of feel like he gets presented with this opportunity or this information or something, like a president would get a briefing.
Yeah.
And then he's like, nope, not having that. Take care of it. and then he just takes care
It's
of it.
basically like those two kids. They were supposed to jog the day before. It like rained.
Yeah.
They're like,
Right.
just gonna make that happen. Like, make sure those joggers are there. Like at that time.
Yeah, and like a light went a little too long or something, and it allowed them to run through, and then they were just in time or something. Yeah, I think there's tons of opportunity, like you said, Tim, to have a low threshold and just be like, that's a miracle. That's a miracle. All over the place.
One thing I was gonna
But
share.
that does, I would say that's good. And it's clearly shaped a lot of your life and your relationship, and
Absolutely. I mean,
not
that's
just with her, but also
that's
with
what
God, right?
I mean, that like I said, that with God as well. Yeah. I mean, that's had a huge impact on both of our lives. Not a lot of people know about it because it's not something that you just like. Hey, you want to hear a cool story? You know, like, you just don't bring it up, but like,
Yeah.
it had a major impact on both of us. It still does. It's something we still talk about quite a lot.
What were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say when my mom got lymphoma, she was in chemotherapy for a pretty long time. Like I don't know, 3-4 months, and I don't know if you remember. You probably remember seeing pictures of her. Like, sure, the growth on her neck was like massive, and she had lymphoma, non-Hodgkin's type B. I don't remember what it was, but it's like a really rare type of lymphoma, and she ended up doing really well and like coming through the whole thing, and she never had until she died, like she didn't have lymphoma ever again. But I didn't really, obviously we were like, she was very, very stubborn about going to the doctor initially, so she really, really delayed her odds of surviving the whole thing successfully, because she was so stubborn about going to the doctor. And my mom's very much like, no, this is just like a spiritual thing, and like God's just going to make it go away, and like all that kind of stuff. So we ended up almost like, it was like an intervention to get her to go to the doctor kind of a thing. And but one of my friends, his wife is a doctor, and he works in medicine too. And so once they found out, like I described to them the situation and like what stage she was at, and I mean I can't tell you any of the scientific terms, but they were just like blown away. I mean, they were pretty much just like told me like flat out that was a miracle. They were like, she had no chance of surviving that. Like she was in stage 3 or something, and like they're just like, that was extremely, extremely miraculous and very, very unlikely. So it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, from by all practical,
Yeah, but here's the fun part. You mark no.
I marked no because, again, like I told you my definition. My definition was if I told that to 3 people at work, they would just say,
But
well,
you told it to people, and they were like,
the chemotherapy did what it was supposed to do. I mean,
that's what I'm
it's just,
I guess that's what I'm trying to say is like, you'll always be able to pin it on something else, always. And then it's a matter of faith to believe one way or another. You're always taking a leap of faith to believe this evidence or the other, just like Matt was saying earlier. And so it's just what you choose to believe, which is why whether or not you actually believe in miracles is so important, because to one person, if you tell that story who believes in miracles, they'll be like, that's a friggin' miracle. The other person who doesn't, they'd be like, wow, chemotherapy's great, isn't it?
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm sticking with my answer.
I'm not telling you to change, I'm just
I think,
teasing it out a little bit.
yeah, I agree with your point.
Is that box wine?
No. It's hexagon wine.
That's awesome.
You want some?
I do kind of want some. I don't have a container. I don't know if I'm man enough to just swig it.
Shotgun it.
Okay, we'll take it.
Would you like a cup?
I kind of would, but I don't want to make you go get it. Let's get through the quiz and then we'll revisit the box.
All right.
The hexagon wine.
I'm done talking, I promise.
I doubt that.
You have any? I suppose you put either. You don't have to say your answer, but any thoughts on this topic or on this question?
Which question are we on again?
Do you know anyone who claims to have witnessed or experienced a miracle and you believe in them?
I put no. I mean, I'm in the same
camp as Tim.
That's weird.
Huh?
Me and you.
Yeah.
Same kid.
That's weird.
Sweet.
Yeah.
That's a miracle.
Yeah. I tend to shy away from declaring everything a miracle because okay. Yeah, I prayed for, that I can't afford gas and somebody came by and gave me $10, is that a miracle? No. Is it a coincidence? Yes. But I don't think God, I'm not saying that he couldn't have, but God did not physically come down here and hand that person $10. He may have adjusted a situation or something like that, but it doesn't make it a miracle to me. To me, a miracle is like, okay, he, made water come out of a rock in the middle of the desert for the Egyptians. That rock followed them in the desert for 40 years. That is a miracle.
Okay, so
They crossed the Red Sea.
am I
I
correct?
remember the part about the rock following him. Did the rock follow him?
You mean the cloud and the pillar?
I think we're talking about the cloud and the fire.
No, the
following
rock
them.
was with them always. The rock was always with
Maybe
them.
they carried the rock.
That's a maybe.
I'm pretty sure there was.
Oh, now we're back into the pros.
I cannot take you seriously. That thing on.
Cat ears are really becoming on me.
No, they're not.
See, be that as it may, I just.
All right,
You can talk with it on, but I just can't take it seriously.
Well, they were just sitting there at my feet. So to restate, or not to
Did you
restate,
just say you were done talking?
I want to
promised.
Clarify?
You actually promised.
restate his stuff. I just want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly. Would it be accurate to say that your definition of a miracle must defy physical law?
It's a freaking badass miracle he wants, that's all.
Yeah, but it sounds like it must defy natural
how
law.
he-
That is
like-
kind of the definition of a miracle.
He's like, no, I just want to make sure I understand. And then he does this like, would it be fair to say that your definition,
David, do you deny?
You're leading the witness.
it's like, yeah, that's a totally leading question. And for two, like, why the pointy hand if you were just like trying to
I
understand
did
what
He's clearly guilty as charged.
It was a whole hand point,
It's like,
much less intrusive.
I don't know. I felt like we were going to smite him.
fair to say?
Well, I think it's only. I don't know. I wonder how much it has to do with the fact that David and I do have like kind of similar backgrounds with going, and maybe Matt though to a certain extent, but
I don't really remember this.
we've got similar backgrounds with the church we went to and our just.
Yeah, but I don't remember any of this from church. This is all just, I heard a sermon, I don't know, not too long ago, and they were talking about miracles and stuff like that, and the pastor was saying, like, what is actually a miracle and what is not a miracle? Is it a miracle for, Christ to be raised from the dead? Yes, that is a miracle, because it can't happen. Is it a miracle for, you to pray that, I gotta have Friday off so I can go to the Chiefs game or, to a sporting game or something like that, and then all of a sudden you have Friday off? No, it's a coincidence,
A God intervened.
I think we don't even have to say it's a coincidence. I think
coincidence is.
I think to me
loosely.
we're losing some of the complexity of in between a coincidence and a. And I know what you're saying. I shouldn't derail your whole argument. Go ahead. I'll talk after.
What's your response to my question?
What was your question?
Accusation.
Is it your belief that a miracle must defy natural law?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Because the question was directed at me, Tim, not
Sorry.
to you.
I just thought it helped
He's
since we're in the same team.
attached.
He's attached
to you.
Yes.
At this point.
Yes.
You guys are the same camp as far as I'm
Tim's
concerned.
like David's attorney over here.
Yeah.
It's like, let me answer that.
Hold on.
Don't answer that, David.
Don't incriminate.
Man, approach the bench. Okay, yeah, I can get on board with that, and that's why.
And I don't want to
I was-
downplay.
No, you're not. I was hesitant. I was hesitant to mark it as a miracle, and I don't like calling them miracles. But that's why I made a big caveat that everything is a miracle to me because This whole
Then
thing
it's-
is
yeah.
crazy.
then it's not a miracle.
But if you look
if
at
everything is miraculous to you, then it can't be a miracle by definition.
Look, Doug, your whole, joyful way of looking at life, just take that.
which is weird. I mean, because based on our relationship, like I am more of the happy-go-lucky, positive person, and you are not. You know? Yeah. And
But I'm more intense, so like when happiness washes upon me, it's a friggin' parade.
well, I understand that, but basically you're saying whenever
like
you get happy,
orgasm
there's a
of
miracle.
happiness.
I mean, it's a miracle that you're happy.
No,
But again, I really agree that there is a really interesting space in between coincidence and and the breaking of natural law, because so much of what motivates humans is not visible and not on the surface. I mean, what does it say? God searches man's heart. So much of God's discussion of man is about his heart, and we ourselves have a very poor view into our heart. I mean, why do I lean towards one way but not towards the other? And to what extent does God influence that? I don't know, but I believe that God has tremendous leeway to influence that in a way that is both supernatural and in accordance with natural law.
And that was actually the point that I was going to make when I was interrupting David to help him defend his case, was that
Because I can't do it well enough.
I feel like that there's a difference between what we can defend as a miracle and what actually is a miracle. Because it's very likely that, like, the examples that you were using, like, I got off Friday for the Chiefs game, or, like, somebody showed up $10, like, it's very likely that God intervened in those situations just as much as in, the water coming out of the rock. Like, so, it just, to me, like, I think Doug's definition was good because it gives us, like, a starting place. Because, to me, like, for all we know, the entire nature of our, physical atoms being held together is a miracle, for all we know. But there's a difference between laws that I'm aware of being physically altered and being momentarily suspended to not things that I'm aware of being suspended. Like, for all I know, my mom's thing was not a miracle because chemotherapy just did what it was supposed to do. So now, do I think it's a miracle? Sure. But, like, I think that's, to me, where, like, one is defensible and one is faith, I guess.
I think it's good. I think it reiterates the threshold. I would like to conclude this portion so I'd like to get to the
there's
rest
a
of
lot
this. But I have one conclusionary statement, which is that it seems like we can all agree that once you have reached the point of God intervening and breaking natural law, we all agree that that is a miracle. So we at least have our high water mark of what we can all agree is a miracle, and that is the breaking of natural law, i.e. the resurrection, is a miracle. So we can agree in that and move forward, I think, with the discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to skip down to a question that I was really curious you guys' answer on, and it's interesting that we're split again. If you believe miracles still happen, do you think they're more common in some parts of the world than others, or that they occur everywhere equally? Split half and half on this, which I think is interesting.
David, I hope we're on the same team again.
I'm sure we probably are.
I said,
Go ahead.
I said that I think that they happen equally everywhere.
oh, we're not in the same camp.
Yeah!
That's fine.
It's all right.
My man!
We're usually not. I mean, it's good to
You got a new lawyer.
it's good to redraw our own old battle lines. This is more familiar.
This is way more comfortable for me for you to be diametrically opposed.
But you and I are never in the same camp.
We are this time, buddy.
It's a miracle.
Let's get a tent and a heater and go camping.
Let's go.
So I think that they happen, and specifically I think that they happen the most in places like Africa, because I think that they're asked for more there, they're looked for more there, they're needed more there, and I think that you just have people's hearts are much more receptive to them. So I think that there's lots more supernatural stuff that goes on there.
True,
Whereas
but
here I think people are so. I mean, if I need just about literally anything, and if I need it, I don't go to God. I'm like, well, how can I get it? And then most of the time I can get it through my own means, which is a double-edged sword, certainly. And so I think because of that, I hardly ever ask for miracles, hardly ever think about miracles, hardly ever experience them, you know? So I think just by nature of that, if you're a more poor, desperate, open, heart on your sleeve type society, I think that God just like gravitates to that and is working on that.
True, but my problem with that is like, what if we were Africa? Like, what if we were just as bad off? I mean, you're talking about Africa, but I mean, what about India or parts of China that are just as poor? Like, I don't necessarily think that. I think they probably. How do I say this? I think they don't happen here as much because they aren't asked for as much. But I don't think that.
Wasn't that the question though? What was the question again?
I read the question of like, do they happen like specifically in certain areas of the world? Because. What was the question?
Just read it out loud.
If you believe miracles still happen, do you think they are more common in some parts of the world than others, or that they occur everywhere equally?
Okay. I guess my answer, I don't know if I would change it, but like, I think if they were asked, equally, then they would occur equally.
That's fair.
So I don't
Don't
necessarily.
put buyer's remorse on me.
I know, no.
So can I?
I wouldn't. I didn't know if it
You
meant
threw
like.
a huge clause on the question.
Well, I didn't know. Did you develop these questions?
Yeah, I wrote them on myself.
I didn't know if you were saying like, okay, so over in Israel because they were closer to Christ and where he actually walked, there's more propensity for miracles to happen there.
Relics and stuff. It's a good.
No, I
it's
just
a good
mean
topic.
I just think that certain societies are much more. Certain societies are looking for them and praying for them, and I think God responds. I don't think He forces it
So would you say?
as often.
Would you say there's any correlation between faith / poverty or your wealth, I guess, and the level of miracles? So, because what I heard from you is that the poorer you are, or the more you need to be reached, the more miracles would happen around you. Did I hear that right?
Well, I mean, we're talking about things that are correlated, but obviously not true in every instance, right? So,
Sure.
poor
without
societies tend to be more religious. Very religious societies tend to be more, they have. I just think that they're less skeptical. They're less calculating. They don't have budgets and plans and 10-year goals and blah blah blah. They're much more subsistence life. And there's something. I think there's something about having not a lot of infrastructure, not a lot of fallback plans, not a lot of your own strength, not a lot of your own resources. That kind of ties into poverty. Being more religious, I think there's a mix of attributes there that cause God to act more frequently in those societies.
Okay.
We'll say that, like, yeah, I mean, either. Go ahead, sorry. Were you gonna talk?
You guys were both like getting ready.
I was gonna say either they cause God to act more, or potentially they also cause people to have more faith. Like, I don't know what I mean.
Okay, so by those rules,
Aren't you gonna point at me?
I got called out on that.
Now he doesn't know what to do.
By those
Tuck your hands
rules,
into your shirt.
by those rules, that would mean that the more faith that you have, the less miracles will happen around you.
The more miracles will happen around you.
The less.
The more
No,
faith
the
you
more.
have, the more.
So you're saying as they get poorer, they get more faithful?
Yes, they're required to have more faith.
I think
Because
I
they
think
are-
there's a-
Sorry, that's not the way
I
to say
think
it. They're not
there's-
required to. They simply.
It's a more edgy thing. Like, if I'm praying to God because there's a good chance I'm not going to be able to have food for my kids in a month because there's a war going on, and I don't know where the heck that meal's going to come from, that's such a different prayer and such a different faith than me because I'm honestly not at all worried about getting food for my family next month. Maybe I should be.
What if
But that's just such a
What if
different
you're a
prayer.
person who's living outside of their means by your own sin? And you don't know it. And God not providing that miracle is correcting you in that moment. Like,
I don't think. To me,
I don't
okay.
see-
Like
I
I
don't
feel
see-
like
You're conflating. I'm talking societies. You're talking. Well, what about this individual exception? Obviously,
I don't
obviously, I'm
think that's
talking.
an
I mean,
exception. I guess I'm going to table that point. I am quite opposed to your subtext. You didn't say this explicitly, but everything that you implied was that as you go into an organizational structure for God and faith, i.e., churches, that they somehow lose their authenticity or their
No, I
genuineness
wasn't saying
or
that.
I don't
their
think he
level
said
of
that.
faith.
I don't think
He
he said that.
did with
no, he
your
did
subtext.
not. No, he didn't. There was no
Okay,
subtext.
hold on a second. Let me finish my points.
now we got all 10 fingers out.
Well, good lord, stereo over here. I mean, I can point out how you said that. So,
Okay.
you had said that people who don't have organizational structures and the means to do all of these things would have a greater faith, is what you said. And that is not necessarily true. I believe, I have to believe, that as we grow in faith, even if we're successful, that we do not, it's not diluting our faith. And I'm not saying you intended to make this point. I just need to be very clear about this because that's a serious point that seemed to just float by, and I just need to
think
call
he's
it out.
100% accurate. Like, basically, you don't feel like the wealth of our society makes it easier to exercise less faith in God than you would have to in other circumstances. Like, I don't feel like that was making a huge leap, I guess.
Really?
Yeah.
Try and convince a poor person that God exists when they've watched their kids die in front of them from starvation, or watched war around them ravage their city or their town, etc. Try and convince them that evil is something that God's allowing, and that God is something that they should be worshiping and praising. That's a difficult sell.
But that's the paradox, though. You know,
But I mean,
It is, but that's what I'm saying is, like-
you're actually making the opposite argument you're making before. Like, people come to those circumstances the same way they come to miracles. They either come to those circumstances believing in God or not believing in God.
Exactly, and it
And so-
doesn't matter where you're at in life, is my point.
But
so
but
our pastors-
having said that, they already come to the circumstance with that decision already made that they believe in God or they don't believe in God. But the point is that their circumstances in their life have predisposed them to have to trust God in more because their life is more difficult. Like, I actually feel like that's a fairly biblical principle.
It is a biblical principle, but you're moving it downstream. I'm talking about that point of making the decision. That's where faith and praying for miracles
But in
comes
order
in.
for people to have faith and in order for people to pray for miracles, they already have to be believers. So
No.
the argument is already done.
That's not necessarily true. Not at all true, in fact. Most people, if they're at their absolute lowest and they've never believed, that would be like, I've exhausted every opportunity.
Well,
People
okay.
tell me to pray up here.
No, I mean, you're
so
right. You're right.
Let me
But-
give God a shot.
But praying to an unknown God, while possible that it actually works, like I think the context of Matt's argument here is we're talking about believers in other countries or in circumstances that are worse than our own. And I think the argument he's making, I mean, at least for me, I don't think that I would have any way of defending it from a proof standpoint. But I think it's one of those things that's it's reasonable to me. It's a reasonable supposition. We don't have any proof to say that people who are in poor societies have more faith. But I think we do have some evidence we could point to that the Chinese church or the African church, their growth rates far exceed our growth rates in.
But that's not a miracle
conversions
according
of
to your
believers.
own. According to your own definition, that's not a miracle. So that's not a miracle.
he just said that he knows he can't prove it.
No. I'm not asking you to prove it, and I don't actually disagree with what that notion is. I just want to be very clear that I don't believe that as you
As you get more affluent, that your faith has to go down.
right, or that,
I don't think
or
he's saying
that it's
that
being.
has to happen.
I just want to be clear.
You're being clear.
Well, I can't even finish a sentence, so it's difficult to be clear. But the point is, I don't think that you meant to say it, but I have to clarify because that's a big point. And if you did mean to say it, I think it's worth discussion. That let's say we can normalize these people. So we take 10 people from the poor, 10 people from the middle class, 10 people from the affluent. They're all believers. They all believe in miracles. What do you believe is the correlation? I'm pointing at you again, I'm sorry. What do you believe is the correlation of miracles in that? Do you think that there's any difference?
Again, I'm looking at it more holistically from a cultural perspective. So rich, poor, that's an aspect of it. Another
Okay.
aspect of it is how stable is the country. So in every country there's rich people, but even in Somalia there's rich people, but there's also a civil war going on there since 15 years. So you have political stability. You also have... when I was saying organization, I wasn't at all implying that organized church's organization hampers faith at all. I think that's absolutely the opposite. But I meant how strong are the courts in your country. So if someone is threatening your livelihood, then do you have any legal recourse, or do you have nothing to do but plead out to God? You know, I'm just saying that there's a whole cultural backdrop that I exist in where I have so many alternatives to reaching out to God that I usually don't. That's all I'm saying.
And so you think...
And so I think that because there's a lot of verses, and I do, if you'll look at the paper, there are a lot of verses that I've included at the very end, which are basically ask and it will be given to you, whatever you ask in prayer you'll receive. There's I tell you truly, if you have faith, you say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move, nothing will be impossible to you. And I'm just making the point that Scripture says many times you need to ask. And I feel that because I have so many other recourses, I either don't ask or I ask in a kind of vague, oh, please let this turn out well. But it's not like it's not like this man is stronger than me, he's harassing my family, he might kill us, or the government might knock on our door because we're Christians. We don't know what to do, God. You know, like I just hardly ever have to put myself out there and be like, God, I just need you to come through for this, you know?
But so I think I misunderstood your point before, so I apologize for that.
Thank you.
It sounded to me like you were implying that as you went into an organized faith, that they lost their ability. God stopped listening as much as he did to the people asking down below in a war zone. And I just don't, I can't believe it.
Yeah, no, I don't support that either.
But furthermore, when it comes to these things, God cares about all of our stuff. And there's a lot of scriptures that back that up, even the most minuscule things. And so even if you pray vaguely, he's listening and he'll take care of it. I see where you're going in that they have so many more things to pray for protection, to pray for food, etc. And no, it's not great compared to the plush surroundings that we have, but there's a lot of places too where we're just pretentious about it. You know, we look at our mansions compared to what these people have, and they're perfectly happy and fine, and we're not. And
yeah, I agree with that.
And so I guess what I'm saying is, like, they're probably not praying for, dear Lord, please help me make my house payment, you know, whatever. They probably built their house, or whatever. And I guess I see where you're going in that they, in theory, have more to pray for, specific things to pray for, and that their stuff is maybe more serious in like a third world country.
Yeah.
But I don't believe that it's any less important, if that makes sense. To
like
God.
that ours is less important.
Yeah. Like there isn't this priority
I think
queue.
I agree with that. I don't think God plays favorites, but again, I think that if you, I mean, there's that great parable about the corrupt judge, and the lady always comes to him and says, "Give me justice." And he rebukes her. And finally, he's like, "Even though I don't care about God or man, because she keeps bothering me, I'm going to do this." And I think that so much of like whether or not a miracle happens or not depends on us asking our dad to please make this, or to please, act, to please do something,
Okay.
And I just think that we in our society have much less drive
Yeah.
to just ask,
I would agree with that. And ask persistently.
and ask persistently.
And be persistent and
Specific.
confident. And
And there is, I think also there's a thing where it's like that may actually have, it's really hard to say, and it may have less to do with the fluency and more to do with the fact that we're just in a very, I don't think you're necessarily making a claim either way, but it may have more to do with, we're just, I think even those of us who in the United States have, are very, spiritual, religious, have a lot of faith, whatever, we're still categorically extremely secular.
Yeah.
Or like we're very humanist minded. Like
Yeah.
without knowing it, it's like very permeated into us.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
I guess I'm curious, like, from hearing you guys talk, it sounds like every time God answers a prayer, you guys are considering it a miracle.
What? Oh, because he asked about miracles?
Well, yeah, I mean, this whole conversation is about miracles, but we're also talking about, like, just
Answering prayer.
prayer requests. I mean, yeah,
I mean, going back to going back to our earlier discussion and the way Doug defined it, I think what we've tried to say is that if we knew when God intervened, then yes, we could say that everything is a miracle. But since we're trying to define miracles as things that we can prove God intervened, then it becomes more of a distinction. But like, I'm very, like, for me, I feel like we're going to get up to heaven and we're going to find out that, like, literally everything was a miracle. More like Doug's view. Like, so, but, sorry, a mischaracterization of your view. More like your,
That's fine.
Your,
No, no.
your
You're good.
view
Go
of
on.
enjoying life. How about that?
Yeah.
Your philosophy. So, but I think for the time being, like in this current reality, the only way I can define a miracle is one that I can say is a rupture of physical laws.
Yeah. And I think, so to
My
answer
problem
your
with that-
statement is this whole conversation has been in the gray area.
yeah.
But also, what's been talked
You
about?
point at me. I don't care. I'm
Well, I was
You can
pointing at
point at
him.
him. You can point at him.
I don't care.
I had fun giving you a hard time until I realized that,
I'm
like,
really easy to
you're
poke
like
at.
you're like taking it and like it's so big deal. Either way.
What's been discussed, I believe, is more about the quantity of prayers and the persistence of prayers
Yeah.
in other societies, and that they're more diligent and maybe a little bit more loyal to that than our society.
And I get
and
that.
therefore the small amount of actual miracles, breaking of natural laws miracles that would happen based on the numbers would happen outside of here. It would follow, therefore, to the persistent prayer. So, by that connection, any natural laws that may be broken as a result of answered prayers, statistically speaking, would be in a.
feel like
You want more conditional statements?
You're on the home stretch.
Statistically speaking, would be outside of the U.S.
Correct.
or
And I agree
or a
with
developed country.
I agree with that. I just,
Okay.
the way the conversation was going, and as I was listening to it,
I don't know. Anyone could agree with that without a calculator. I mean, hopefully you were following the if-then propositions in there.
I've been learning.
it just sounded to me like every time that God answered a prayer, we were, it's a miracle. Okay, that in and of itself, goes against the actual definition of a miracle. To me, we're talking about miraculous signs, miraculous things.
I think we agree with.
Happen.
I think we agree with your definition, but I mean, can you concede that our definition of miracle may, in fact, be limited in scope? based on our current viewpoint, our current understanding.
Can you bring down the glass?
Is this jump necessary?
Can you bring down the glass?
He's so quick.
Free online.
Yeah, I'll give you one.
All right, so let's.
I mean, it's possible that, like, you know,
You're saying based on our current knowledge.
based on our current knowledge, yes. I mean, you know, I don't necessarily want.
No, I mean,
I don't want- I don't want
you're
the sun
applying
coming up.
the same definition to a miracle that, you know, a scientist applies to, you know, trying to detect the age of the earth. I mean, I think your definition of a miracle is reasonable. It's just that it just may not contain the entire picture. That's all.
True, but you know, again, we don't know God's heart. We don't know his, you know, his thought process. We don't know what he considers a miracle. You know, and so
Yeah,
to me, it, you know, I don't.
we need to stick with the definition. Is that what
I
you're
want to
saying?
stick with the definition because, you know, when he talks about it being a miracle, like it's a miracle to me. Like
Right.
I don't want Doug being happy to be a miracle. I don't want Doug seeing the sunrise to be a miracle.
I mean, nobody wants that.
No, I mean, I don't want, you know, I'm back, it's a miracle. Yeah, Doug's back, it's a miracle. He could have not come back, you know, but he did. You know, he probably would have forgot the cup if I asked for it, so it's a miracle he remembered it.
Did you want something?
No.
All right. Point taken. I agree.
All right.
Let's let Matt get back to it though.
Okay, so
Point 3.
I think that pretty much. I think that
Page 2.
that was a lot of really interesting, good discussion. So thank you for that on the quiz. Do you guys want to see the best YouTube video I found of a miracle?
Fatio?
What's a fatty?
Sorry, the best YouTube video I found of a miracle.
Yeah.
This was like the bulk of my research, just watching stuff on YouTube.
Well done.
Well, then that's not a miracle.
For some reason, I was like, you know, like being American means you have this like huge amount of baseless optimism. And for some reason, I launched into this as like, oh, I'm totally gonna be able to prove God's existence on YouTube. Like,
YouTube.
yeah, I was totally like, oh yeah, there's gonna be some crazy video, and it's just gonna be like, see, God, yeah, see, like. Anyways,
So you're saying there's not?
I don't know. It's up for you guys to decide.
An SUV driver tried to
There's 2 videos in this. It's 5
got
minutes.
stuck, and as the waters rose, the driver couldn't escape.
I think the second one is more compelling, but we'll watch both.
What no one knew about 35-year-old Charlene D. Herrera as her SUV was slowly swept towards deeper water was that Charlene, just coming home from work, still in her Wendy's uniform, trapped inside, couldn't swim. Which explained why she called her brother on her cell phone, instead of just saving herself like almost everyone here, horror-struck and watching, was hoping she'd do. In sickeningly slow motion, with all 4 car windows shut tighter than a drum, Charlene and her car slipped into water about 10 feet deep and sank. The first to reach her was a doctor, but try as he did, that was no match for the safety glass.
I was pounding away, and she had her hands against the glass, and she was terrified.
And then, Charlene was gone. Almost a full minute went by, but unbeknown to everyone was that Howard Absets, a 43-year-old unemployed store manager, the man in the middle, had somehow reached through Charlene's front window.
For me to actually feel her grasp my arm was a real shock. And then the second time that she grasped my arm, I knew right then that I could get her out.
Up she came. Of course, no one knew Charlene couldn't swim, and there was a moment coming up here where she almost drowned the good doctor. But everyone eventually dragged Charlene to safety. But here's the odd part. When Charlene's car came from the water, all 4 windows were still closed. How they opened just enough to let her out and then closed again, no one knows.
There was something there. I can't explain it, but something happened for her to be able to be alive today, for me able to pull her out. Something happened for that to happen.
Something Charlene, Howard, and everyone here is still wondering about. For today, John Larson, NBC News.
So there's 2 now?
There's another one that comes.
Did her window open and close by itself?
That is
or
pretty
did she
freaking
somehow
crazy,
pass
though,
through
you
the
know?
solid glass?
Because it's
Nobody
an electric,
knows.
it's an electric motor, so it wouldn't work underwater, right?
Originally, he said.
So how does it open and close underwater?
If you go back, when you listen to it, he's like, his hand passed through the front window.
Yeah, that is what they said.
Yes, boys, you have to do this. Calling for help. We are learning some brand new details about the moments a toddler was found alive 14 hours after the car that she was in crashed
So you think
into a
miracles
river.
only happen in
4
floodwater
rescuers in
situations?
Utah now say that they definitely heard a woman's voice screaming and begging for help before they reached the car, which was under the water. But they can't explain it because that child's mother was dead inside the car.
When we all talked together, I said, was I the only one that's hearing this, thinking I was hearing this? When we talked together, officers, we all heard the same thing, a voice saying, help us, help me.
So remarkable. 18-month-old Lily Grosbeck, she was hanging upside down in her car seat when the rescuers finally got to her. They say it is a miracle that she survived. Wow, baby Lily is still in the hospital, but her family says she is getting much better. That mother's voice, in my opinion, was an angel. And all of them heard it. So, yeah, interesting.
Right now! Harry, get over here, Beddoes. We're out then, we're coming! Better get down here and read and try and flip it.
There, it plays it again.
Hey, get
You
over
can
here,
hear her
Beddoes.
voice.
We're out then,
You hear
we're
that in the
coming!
background? They're like, that.
Better get over here, Beddoes. We're out then, we're coming!
It's pretty faint, but you can hear it. I don't know. Those are both really.
I didn't hear a voice. Was that me?
It's not a voice. It's more like a It's like a really, but it's like it's that, and also the fact that like the reason why they went down there is because they heard someone screaming, in the first place.
It could have been the mom.
Because it was under the bridge, yeah. But they said she'd been dead for 14 hours.
The car was under the water.
And they said that she'd been
14 hours?
Yeah, they said that she'd been dead for a long time when they heard the screams. So I don't know. That was the best I found.
To me, it's just like, how old is the Earth? How old was she really dead? Was it actually 14 hours, or was it like 14 minutes?
Surprised that you're,
so skeptical.
Surprised that you're sold on the fact that gravity's going to be here like tomorrow. Like maybe it won't be.
It might not be, and if it's not, then God has a reason for it not to be.
There's several. There's an interesting character in a Douglas Adams book who they eventually end up realizing is the man who runs the universe. And but his primary feature is that he forgets everything the next day. So everything he discovers again is like the first time every time.
Nice.
And so
I saw that movie.
He's basically like
Minto?
50 First Dates.
That's a she.
They bring him all the decisions for the entire universe because he doesn't have any. He's not capable of forming preconceived notions because he forgets everything every day.
Sounds like the market. So
I thought the first one was really compelling, actually.
Yeah.
No.
So I don't know. I mean, I thought like when I saw these two, I was like, man, those two seem like. They seem really strong, but there's something about you that just instinctively pulls back and is like
Explains it.
Huh?
Explains it some other way.
Yeah, there's something about you that's like, yeah, the way you presented that is super compelling, but I don't want to quite believe it. And so then when I became convinced that I wasn't going to be able to prove the existence of God by finding that one YouTube video, then I went on to scientific studies about miracles.
I don't think God would allow you to find.
Well, I did say that my optimism is often baseless. And in this case, it absolutely was. So the best one.
Science.
So the best study I found this one that I referenced the other day, which is called the AWARE study. It was the largest study that I'm aware of. If you look down a little bit, then you can see that maybe it doesn't have the. Well, if you take a look at some of these links, it was 25 hospitals among, I think, like something crazy, like 10 different countries. And they had around 2,000 people that went through. You know, they had 2,000 incidents where, okay, there was a cardiac event, person's basically passed out, and then from that 2,000, they had, you know, I don't know, maybe 1,000 or so that had actually they claimed to have experienced something like a near-death experience or whatever. And the cool thing about this study is that all of these hospitals put the same signs in the ceilings where the people couldn't see, where they couldn't be seen from the ground. And so the idea was that if your consciousness does float out of your body and you catch a glimpse of the room and you're able to say, oh yeah, I saw that sign that says this, then that's really strong evidence that, you know, that's a near-death experience, that, you know, there's a soul, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's a miracle.
So where do they put the signs?
So basically, like, you know, you've got rafters, and then the signs are facing up, and so you can't see from the ground what it says.
So basically, it'd be like, I have a layer, the layer of sheetrock can be on top of the layer of sheetrock. So if you're laying here, you can't see any.
No.
They just would hang it like
They
right
hang
below
it down.
the sheetrock.
They'd hang it down below the sheetrock.
But it'd be pointed at the sheetrock of the ceiling.
Exactly.
And so you'd have to be in the, like, however much gap in between.
Yeah.
You were wrong, David.
So I think it was really interesting.
If it were above the sheetrock, it wouldn't be in the room. Not like that matters. I don't know the laws of this.
Yeah. So it was.
Crazy idea.
If your conscious is floating in this.
So that the bottom link goes to the actual paper, the actual published paper. At the end, they only had 2 people that they could verify to have some visual experience, and those 2 people.
Only 2 people.
So they had around 1,000 that claimed to have something, but most of the people were describing, I don't know, either, you know, I saw my family, or I was afraid, or something like this. It was very, like, vague.
Bright light.
So they only had 2 people that were describing something in the room, and the problem was with those 2 people, it wasn't something that, it could have been that they picked it up after or even before at another hospital visit. So they were describing very accurately, like,
None of them reported seeing the signs.
machines or something, yeah, but there's never any mention of the signs, so that was the best study that I found. I mean, there are other websites out there where, like, there was one website that was all about, you know, keeping track of how much a hospital patient is prayed for, and then whether or not they get better or not, and like, yeah, we can prove that because these guys are prayed for and these aren't, and they've got a better rate than statistically, blah blah blah. So there's a lot of other stuff out there. But there's not really any, like, slam dunk that I found where it's like...
Yeah, I mean, I've heard plenty of those before, but the problem with those is that it never can be strongly proven that it's not entirely psychological.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. That's what I found of Miracles by Justin Hume. And at this point, I kind of agreed with him that, like, yeah, you know, like, I do think that... Honestly, I think the miracle that is most likely to convince someone that God is real is what Doug described last week. Like, just the miracle of how we got here in the first place, you know? To me, that's the most compelling and the most difficult for natural law to explain, because when you cycle natural law back, it doesn't make sense. So, so if you're ever asking yourself...
which is why, like, the current, like, naturalism in our society is so, like, insidious. I mean, and so, like, I think pervasive in making people not interested in thinking about God or thinking about the afterlife. I mean, so.
Well, insidious is a good word for it, because it really makes sense in day-to-day life, and it only unravels if you roll all this back to some sort of beginning and how must it have begun, and then it starts to make no sense at all.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, again, it's not really like a huge story here. It's just more that I think that there are miracles all the time. We all believe that there are miracles, but as far as, like, documented evidence, you know, it's hard to. I don't think it really exists, honestly.
I mean, what do we think about, like? I mean, this is obviously a different topic for a different day, but, like, I mean, what do we think about the miracle, like the resurrection? You know, I mean, like, that would be interesting to. We could go through the Case for Christ book. I mean, they do a pretty, like, thorough
You should
analysis
do
of that miracle.
Would you want to? Do you have your topics yet?
Yeah, he's doing hell next time. Remember?
No.
I'm doing what?
Hell.
I'm going like who goes to heaven, who goes to hell.
Exactly, because we got in that big like debate / argument that more people go to hell than not. You know?
Yeah.
I can do a case for Christ.
Okay. Good. I want to go through that one. I'll probably read it too with you. If that's okay.
Are we gonna do the entire thing in one night?
We can.
I mean, we did the case for a creator in one night.
I think when we do a huge topic like this in one night, it makes the topics really interesting.
Yeah, you're right.
I don't have a problem splitting it up between the 2 weeks.
It's way smaller than the creation of the entire universe.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I kind of think that I think it's cool that we do the entire thing in one night. I mean, it's like, to me, it makes it very interesting. It's like jam-packed with material.
Yeah, I mean, we could milk it, but there's so many topics I want to discuss.
I won't do it in 2 weeks. I'll do it in one.
I don't know.
No, do it in 2 weeks. That's fine. That's
I
fine.
couldn't tell what Tim was saying, if he liked it or didn't like it. Do you want me to do it in 1 or 2 weeks? Tim wants 1 week.
Whatever you think. Whatever you think. Do 2.
I want 2 weeks.
Do 2.
I don't care what you want. It's about what I want.
I want a Driscoll. 3rd week.
Driscoll.
He's not preaching anymore. Actually, he is.
Go back to one of his old ones, see?
Alright, we'll talk about...
Bring out a porn one.
We'll talk. I have an
Born
idea.
again Christians. Here we go.
No, we did that. Okay, I'm sorry. Real quick, no, I'll let you finish.
Good judgment.
Thank you. It's topical, it related. But
And like, if you look at the kind of ABC, like, under number 2, so it's like, okay, there's the videotapes, which were like, somehow very compelling, but they lack something. And then since I lived in like this naturalistic, humanistic society, I went to the scientific study, and then it was like a total woof, like didn't find anything at all. And then I just came back to the stuff that to me seems most compelling is the anecdotes, and this is stuff that you guys tell as well. And it's so weird to me because I don't know why this anecdote would be more compelling than the video that I saw, but for some reason it is. So I just found this on some missionary's website. She just says that I was living in this country, there was a civil war, we met for church for prayer, and I just got this desire for some ice cream. And I'm thinking, good Lord, I'm so selfish, why can't I ask you for ice cream right now? But things have been so hard, and we've been struggling so much. I was like, I just want some ice cream. And then at noon the next day, a truck from Zimbabwe drove up to the door where I was staying, and the driver got out and knocked. He wanted someone named Naomi. I didn't understand English at the time, but he kept saying Naomi, Naomi. I finally realized that Naomi must be my name in English. So I took the package, when I touched it, my heart froze. I knew right away because the box was cold. So I asked the driver who said this, where did it come from? He didn't understand anything, but through gestures, I got that he must have come from the airport, and he had to deliver a box to Naomi. Well, I opened it, and sure enough, it was ice cream, So it's like, I don't know why, but for some reason that seems so much more compelling to me. Just this random, bizarre story about praying for ice cream and getting it in the middle of a civil war zone.
Dude, it's a great story. That's why.
And like...
Well, there's several things going on here.
Yeah.
Like, it's so trivial. I guess it's so trivial that it would be... There's very little incentive for, like, making it up, I guess, is one thing.
Yeah.
In some way.
That doesn't stop them. Tell my grandparents. Tell my grandparents in the forewords that I get about how Obama is a Muslim and here's all the evidence and how this country is whatever and Texas is going to secede. And I mean, there's very little reason for these people to do something, it seems, but there's always a reason.
But does her story sound compelling at all to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great story.
You're just saying it's not any better than any other story.
It seems like an email forward to me.
Yeah.
It seems like something with an American flag waving at the end in a GIF. Like, cool. It's not that I want to discredit it. It's not that I want to. It's not that I want to be cynical.
I'm a little bit surprised by this viewpoint from you, though.
If this Naomi lady were telling me to my face, and I could actually see her expression, and like hear her tell it, okay, I will listen and I will trust the people that I hear. But going to the internet and finding an anecdotal story, especially from a missionary website, like, I'm sorry, but you just passed multiple yellow flags, and it's not going to do a lot for me. It's just not, and I appreciate it, and I think that it's great. But I mean, the YouTube videos are better to me because you see that these people are not like paid actors. They're just like
not trying to raise money.
Man, I don't even know what happened. I just reached, boy. It felt like I was right through that with shit, boy. I pulled it right out. I don't even know what happened. Like, I know he didn't talk like that at all. But the point is, like,
did you even watch the video?
There was a car.
I think that was the doctor.
So anyway, I have enough. I think this is a representative story, so whether it's true or not doesn't matter as much. I think that things like this happen all the time. Yeah. I think given the high watermark definition, it's not a miracle. But given my definition, it's God intervention, and it's a mini miracle. And it's in that gray zone. It's an evidence of God intervening, and I think that beyond just these physical things, I think it transcends into works inside of our own hearts, works inside of our relationships, works in the sense that this group is still going on somehow after like 5 years of...
That is a miracle.
I'm just saying, like...
Oh, from the guy who doesn't hardly ever believe in him. Or has a really high bar for classifying it.
No kidding.
If a rock does not follow me around as a water fountain, it's not a miracle.
So I read
that's my impression of you.
I read a book on... This is a long time ago now, so I don't know what the book was, but I read a book that a non-believer friend of mine gave me on paranormal experiences. And I bet roughly 60 to 70% of the stories in there were Christian, actually.
Yeah.
Even though the book was actually just a record of paranormal things. And so, obviously, a bunch of the stories in there, were from other crazy spiritual happenings that I had no explanation of whatsoever, at least in my current, framework, unless they were demonic somehow.
Yeah.
But the Christian stories in there were very interesting, and they actually made me, at the time, I was very much going through a phase of not believing in miracles at all. Yeah. And it actually made me reconsider my viewpoint quite a bit, just because of the viewpoint of the book was not, the viewpoint of the book was that the paranormal happens, not that the Christian paranormal happens.
Yeah.
But one of the interesting ones that I remember very vividly was a description of the Huguenots in France.
Yeah.
And they were, of course, like very heavily persecuted by the Catholic Church at the time. Even though if you kind of read about them, they're pretty much just like Anabaptists or Baptists later. I mean, they have like very, very similar views to us and 100 other denominations since. But there was this description of this lady who they put up against a stone wall. And they were like hitting her with a sledgehammer, and the sledgehammer like was literally breaking the wall behind her and left her like undamaged. And it's one of those things like, to Doug's point, like I don't know that it's any more likely or less likely to be true than the story about ice cream, in the sense that what I have about it is just from that book, and I don't know if it's any more or less true than all the scientific evidence of the world being millions of years old or not. I mean, it's how do you validate any things like this? But I know that the story was very compelling to me and very interesting to me, and the book, I think, as a whole, was very compelling just because of its non-Christian and more secular viewpoint.
Yeah, and all the biblical examples of that, people being thrown into the fires. Who's that? Daniel.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Yep.
Daniel the Lion's
Den. The Lion's Den is the one I was confusing the two. Just all that stuff. Yeah, I think we have a lot of examples of definitive, above the fill mark, miracles, and then we've gone through the minutia of anything lesser than that, but greater than just normal occurrences. I don't know. Regardless of this, like, it doesn't affect my belief in miracles and that they happen. And if this did happen, if somebody told me, even if they were completely pulling a con, like, I would classify that as in my
It's
mini
interesting
miracle.
that you would believe the exact same story just coming, like, so if I had just said, like, man, my cousin told me this and just told it to you, you would find that more credible than just reading it?
Well, yes, because I trust that you trust people.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't pass it along unless you trusted them, and I trust you.
Yeah.
There's so much more. I think the sad thing that's dropped with a lot of the internet and just the fact of how remote we are as far as our socializing is, there's so much communication that happens that's not verbal or textual.
Yeah, that's true.
And in fact, 70-80%.
Yeah, just like looking at people.
And you know what? That's just
This
from
stuff right here.
That's just from a visual. Yeah, it's pointing at people. It's just from a visual standpoint, almost.
Yeah.
That's not even taking into account, like, which something. This is going to sound horrible, especially on this podcast, but energy, like. I believe that you can pick up on people's vibes. Like, that's a real hippie thing, but I think that people give off some sort of vibe, and that...
Because we can put out candle flames with just our
yes.
G energy.
Yes, we can Hadouken and put out candles. But I almost think that just like notes have a frequency and a whatever, that we kind of put out our own frequencies from time to time, which is how humans can sense when someone goes from happy to upset nearly instantaneously. It's not just facial explanation or expressions.
Yeah.
My wife knows when something she said has annoyed me, when all I've done is frozen. Like, I consciously do not react. She's like, what? And I'm like, nothing. She's like, come on. And I'm like, okay. So
shit, worked so hard to get out of you.
No, I try and be open and honest, but if I can get away with not having to bring something, anyway.
Yeah.
The point is that I think that that's something that, given our current technology, we can't measure it, right? We just now started being able to measure gravity waves, and it took two giant. If you believe the science, it took two giant black holes exploding together.
And hundreds of millions of years.
Yes. If you, like I said, there was a caveat, David. You can just go upstairs if you want. There's a giant caveat. You have to believe in science. So two giant black holes collided and sent out these huge waves. We have these. I don't remember how big it is. It's I don't know, maybe a mile apart. Does anyone know about the sensor? It doesn't matter.
The sensors were on either coast.
I don't know anything about this.
Yeah, that's right.
There's
you
a
guys have
sensor
to
on the
fill
East
me in
Coast
on
and the
this.
West Coast.
Okay, and so basically they measured flux in the gravity
space-time.
In space-time
gravity,
continuum.
space-time.
No. I'm talking about the gravity waves.
Yeah, but the thing that vibrates is space-time.
The fabric of space-time continuum?
Yeah.
No, the thing that is vibrating is space-time, and
it affects the gravity.
Yeah, it can be observed via observing fluctuations in gravity.
So how does the flux capacitor?
It's 1.21 gigawatts. Anyway, the point is, like, we just now, as of September 2015, are able to detect those. So, like, it's fully conceivable in my mind that there's a lot going on within our human body and our mind and our consciousness, which is my follow-up point to the previous thing, that I'll end it quickly, but there's a lot that we just don't know, that we can't measure, that's unseen. It is, quote, supernatural. And I think that mere measure, humans are created by God to be able to detect and read that stuff. And so yes, it goes far and away just so much more believable if somebody were to even tell me that story, even if they're a perfect stranger, than reading it on a text.
That whole thing was about that.
All right, let me read the scripture and then I'm done my piece. That is one of my favorite pieces of scripture.
Wait, okay, before you do,
sure,
before I forget. Back. Sorry, Doug.
It was actually a really good rabbit trail.
I'm sure it was.
Thank you. I'll edit it out.
Then we won't get David slammed at the end.
This is such a good slam.
Go back to the beginning when I was talking about Moses and the people wandering through the desert.
I don't think the rock didn't follow him.
Okay. 1 Corinthians 10, 1 through 4.
Then the rocker fountain followed them.
For I do not want you to be unaware, brothers, that our fathers were all under the cloud, and all passed through the sea, and all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea, and they all ate the same spiritual food, and they all ate the same spiritual drink, and they all drank the same spiritual drink. For they drank from the spiritual rock that followed them, and the rock was Christ.
And because of your literal translation, that means a rock rolled around with them for 40 years.
No, because of the literal translation in Exodus of Moses hitting the rock 2 different times, 2 different occasions.
It could have been 2 different rocks.
It was the same rock.
It said that in Exodus?
It just said the rock followed them.
I think this is a follow-up
And the rock
point.
was Jesus.
I think this is a follow-up point. I think we need to come back to this after having consulted
it's
our
fine.
Bibles.
Okay.
I
just
think that
like
you found a good scripture there, and it does say the rock followed. Those words are literally there.
We don't have to
right?
get into a discussion on this right now.
But I do want to check Exodus because I still want to double check. But good fun. When they came to the crowd, a man approached Jesus and knelt before him. Lord, have mercy on my son, he said. He has seizures and is suffering greatly. He often falls into the fire or into the water. I brought him to your disciples, but they could not heal him. You unbelieving and perverse generation, Jesus replied, how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy here to me. Jesus rebuked the demon, and it came out of the boy, and he was healed at that moment. Then the disciples came to Jesus in private, and they asked, why couldn't we drive it out? He replied, because you had so little faith. Truly I tell you, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you.
That's my favorite scripture.
Yeah.
Of all time.
It's so Jesus, like, ridiculously inspiring, ridiculously hard.
Yeah, ridiculously simple.
Yeah. You want to, like, hug him and be like, what the heck are you even talking about at the same time, you know?
Let me buy you a beer.
Jesus must have been...
I would have just been like, can you make me a beer? So I don't have to buy it?
Alright. Is there anything else, or you want to close this?
That was me closing it.
Awesome.
Do you want to pray for us?
Good.
Sure, I'll pray. Do you have any prayer requests?
Lesson.
Well, let's just pray generic prayer.
Let's just pray a generic prayer.
I mean...
Oh, because it's on the podcast. Dude, I talked about, like, such a really personal story, but...
I can edit that out.
Okay. Well, okay, whatever.
Nobody knows, like, yeah.
Just close this in prayer.
Dear Heavenly Father, God, thank you for this group and for this discussion. Lord, thank you that you have acted powerfully in our collective human story in the past, and we thank you that you still act powerfully in all of our stories today, Lord. While we might not always agree on how to identify a miracle, Lord, we all agree that you're still active, and Lord, I pray that then we will then take the logical step of being persistent and consistent and asking that you act and intervene for the good in our lives. Help us to approach conversations with you from the perspective that anything is possible. that you're not constrained or confined in any way, that we can ask for things and you'll consider them, and it's completely within your power to do them, that you will do them from time to time as it suits your plans. Help us to always keep that perspective and not lose it, no matter how scientific and secular and humanist our society may be. Thank you again, Lord. Please bless this group. Please bless anyone that happens to listen to this. In your holy name. Amen.
Thank you for listening to this edition of Godly Talks and Devil's Advocates. Please share your comments and subscribe.